What would you do? Save your starving family with a gold coin you found, or risk everything to tell the truth? This is Faith's story.
In a small village called Omo, there lived a young girl named Faith. Her family was very poor, and they often went to bed with empty stomachs. Faith's father was a hard-working farmer, but the rain had refused to fall for many months and the ground was dry and dusty. One sunny morning, while searching for firewood near the great river, Faith saw something shining brightly in the deep mud. She reached down and pulled out a heavy gold coin that sparkled like the sun. Her heart beat fast with joy because she knew this single coin could buy enough bags of rice and yams to feed her whole family for a long time. However, as Faith turned to run home, she saw her neighbor, a greedy man named Chief Obi, watching her from behind a large baobab tree. Chief Obi had big eyes and a very loud voice, and he always wanted what belonged to others. He stepped out and told Faith that the land belonged to him, so the gold coin was his property too. Faith felt a cold shiver of fear because the chief was very powerful and scary. She held the coin tight in her small hand, wondering if she should run away or stay and fight for her family's hope. The quiet forest suddenly felt very loud with the sound of her own breathing and the chief's heavy footsteps. Chief Obi leaned down and whispered to Faith that he would keep her secret if she gave him half of the gold. He promised to tell the village elders that she found nothing if she agreed to his plan. Faith knew that stealing was wrong and sharing a secret with a greedy man felt like a bad idea. But she looked at her thin arms and thought about her hungry little brothers waiting at home in the village. She felt a deep sadness in her chest because she wanted to be honest, but she also wanted her family to survive the long hunger. The sun began to hide behind the clouds, making the forest look dark and full of spooky shadows. Faith looked the chief in the eye and told him she needed to think about it until the next morning. The chief laughed a mean laugh and told her that if she didn't bring the gold to his big house by sunrise, he would tell everyone she was a thief. Faith walked slowly home, feeling the heavy weight of the gold coin in her pocket and the even heavier weight of the secret in her heart. She didn't eat her small piece of roasted corn that night because her stomach felt like it was full of stones. She lay awake in the dark, listening to the owls hooting, wondering how a lucky find had turned into such a big and scary problem. The next morning, Faith's mother cried because there was no water left in the big clay pot. The well was dry and the children were very thirsty and tired from the heat. Faith's father went out to dig in the dirt, hoping to find some roots to eat, but he looked very old and weak. Faith felt a hot tear run down her cheek as she watched her family suffer while she had a gold coin hidden in her shoe. She wanted to scream and tell them everything, but she was afraid that Chief Obi would send the village guards to lock her away forever. The tension in the small hut was so high that nobody spoke a single word. Just then, a loud knock came at the door, and it was Chief Obi's servant, Zubi. Zubi looked sad and told Faith that the chief was waiting for his gift and was getting very angry. Faith realized that the chief would never stop asking for more once she gave him the first piece of gold. She saw a flicker of kindness in Zubi's eyes and wondered if he could be a friend in this dangerous game. She decided to go to the market first to see if she could change the gold for smaller copper coins without anyone noticing. She covered her head with a scarf and slipped out the back door, praying that the village spirit would protect her. The village market was very busy, with people shouting and goats bleating everywhere. Faith walked past the spice sellers and the cloth weavers, trying to look like a normal girl on an errand. She found an old woman named Mama Rose, who sold beautiful beads and lived in a tiny hut at the edge of the market. Mama Rose was known to be very wise and could see things that others missed with her cloudy grey eyes. Faith showed her the gold coin and asked for help, her voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. Mama Rose whispered that the gold was ancient and carried a message from the ancestors about truth and greed. She warned Faith that the gold would bring bad luck to anyone who tried to keep it all for themselves or stole it from a child. While they talked, Faith noticed a tall man in a red hat watching them from a distance. It was the chief's head guard. Faith's heart jumped into her throat as she realized she was being followed by the chief's men. She quickly hid the gold back in her shoe and thanked Mama Rose, running into the crowd to lose the man in red. The market felt like a giant maze, and every face looked like a spy. Faith ducked behind a pile of big baskets to catch her breath while the guard walked past her. She knew she couldn't go back home yet because the guard would see where she lived and hurt her family. She decided to head toward the great river again, hoping the thick bushes would provide a place to hide and think. As she ran, she bumped into Zubi, the chief's servant, who was carrying a heavy bucket of water. Zubi told her that the chief had told the village elders that a great treasure was stolen from his house. Faith gasped because she realized the chief was framing her for a crime she did not commit. Zubi told Faith that he hated working for the mean chief and wanted to help her escape the village. He said there was a secret path through the hills that led to a neighboring kingdom where the king was fair and kind. Faith felt a spark of hope, but she knew she couldn't leave her mother and father behind in the dry village. She asked Zubi to help her hide the gold in a place where only the honest could find it. They agreed to meet at the big baobab tree when the moon was high in the sky. Faith felt like a brave soldier in a story, fighting against a giant who wanted to take everything away. The night was very quiet, and the stars looked like tiny diamonds scattered across the dark velvet sky. Faith crept out of her house, stepping over the creaky floorboard so she wouldn't wake her sleeping brothers. She reached the baobab tree and found Zubi waiting with a small shovel and a look of worry on his face. They started to dig a hole deep between the roots of the tree to hide the gold coin safely. Just as Faith was about to drop the coin into the ground, a bright light shone on them from the bushes. It was Chief Obi himself, holding a flaming torch and smiling a very wicked and scary smile. The chief shouted that he had caught the thieves red-handed and would take them to the village square for punishment. He grabbed Faith's arm so hard that it hurt, and he snatched the gold coin from her trembling fingers. Zubi tried to fight back, but the chief's guards appeared from the darkness and grabbed him too. Faith felt like the world was ending because her plan had failed and now she was in big trouble. The chief laughed and said that by tomorrow he would be the richest man in the land while they stayed in the dark hut. He didn't care about the rules or the hunger of the village, he only cared about himself. Faith and Zubi were thrown into a small dusty room behind the chief's big kitchen. The door was made of thick wood and the window was too small for a cat to crawl through. Faith sat on the floor and cried because she felt she had brought shame to her family and lost their only hope. Zubi told her not to give up because he knew a secret about the chief that could change everything. He whispered that the chief had a secret room where he hid all the food he stole from the village storehouse. If they could show the elders the food, everyone would know the chief was the real thief. Faith wiped her eyes and realized that the struggle was no longer just about the gold coin. It was about saving the whole village from the mean chief who was making everyone go hungry. She found a small piece of metal on the floor and started to pick at the lock of the wooden door. She walked quietly for hours while the guards outside laughed and drank palm wine loudly. Her fingers were sore and tired, but she didn't stop because she was thinking of her hungry little brothers. Finally, with a small click, the lock turned and the heavy door swung open just a little. Faith and Zubi sneaked through the dark hallways of the chief's house, moving as quietly as two little mice. They followed a sweet smell of dried fish and grain that led them to a heavy iron door. When they pushed it open, they saw mountains of rice, yams, and corn that could feed the whole village for years. Faith felt a wave of anger because the chief was living like a king while her father was digging for dirt roots. She knew she had to tell the village elders immediately, but the guards were still roaming the hallways. She saw a small bell on the wall and had a very clever and risky idea. She told Zubi to run to the village square and ring the big alarm bell while she stayed to guard the food. Zubi was scared, but he nodded and climbed out of a small vent in the wall to find help. Faith stood in the middle of the storehouse, feeling small but very brave in the shadows of the tall bags. She heard the chief's voice coming closer, and her heart started to drum against her ribs like a bird. She hid behind a large sack of beans and waited, holding her breath until her chest felt tight.
The drama was reaching a boiling point, and she knew the next few minutes would change her life. Suddenly, the loud dong, dong, dong of the village alarm bell echoed through the quiet night air. Every person in the village woke up and ran to the square, wondering if there was a fire or a wild animal. Chief Obi ran out of his bedroom in his night clothes, looking very confused and very angry at the noise. He shouted at his guards to find out who was ringing the bell and to stop them at once. Meanwhile, Zubi was shouting at the top of his lungs, telling everyone to follow him to the chief's secret storehouse. The villagers were tired of being hungry and decided to follow the brave boy to see the truth. The crowd reached the chief's house just as the guards tried to push them back with long wooden sticks. But there were too many villagers and they were very determined to find out why the bell was ringing so loudly. They
pushed past the guards and followed Zubi straight to the iron door where Faith was waiting for them. When the elders saw the mountains of food, their eyes grew wide with shock and great disappointment. The chief arrived and tried to lie, saying the food was for a village feast, but nobody believed his lies anymore. The secret was out and the chief's power began to crumble like a dry wall in the rain. The village elders gathered under the great tree the next morning to decide what to do with Chief Obi. The chief sat on a small stool, looking very small and weak, without his fancy clothes and mean guards. Faith stood before the whole village and told the story of the gold coin and how the chief tried to steal it. She spoke with a clear and strong voice, and everyone listened carefully to every word the young girl said. The gold coin sat on a wooden table in the middle of the circle, shining brightly for everyone to see. The scandal was the biggest thing that had ever happened in the peaceful village of Omo. Chief Obi tried to say that Faith was a liar, but Mama Rose stood up and told everyone about the guard who followed the girl. Then Zubi spoke about the many times he saw the chief taking food meant for the poor families. The elders shook their heads in sadness because they had trusted the chief to lead them and protect them from harm. They decided that the chief must leave the village forever and never come back to bother the people. All the food in the secret storehouse was to be shared equally among every family in the village. Faith felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders, and she finally smiled a real happy smile. As the villagers began to carry the bags of rice and yams to their homes, a low rumble of thunder sounded in the sky. Dark, heavy clouds gathered over the village, and the air began to feel cool and very fresh for the first time. Suddenly, large drops of rain started to fall, splashing on the dry ground and making the dust turn into mud. The people cheered and danced in the rain, catching the sweet water in their hands and laughing with pure joy. It felt as if the spirits were happy that the truth had been told and the greed was gone. Faith's father hugged her tightly, and they both cried tears of happiness in the pouring rain. The gold coin was used to buy new seeds and strong tools for every farmer in the village so they could plant again. Faith's family had plenty to eat, and her brothers grew strong and healthy with full bellies and big smiles. Zubi became invited to live with Faith's family, and he became like a big brother who helped with the chores. The village of Omo became a place of sharing and kindness, and nobody ever went hungry or felt alone again. Faith learned that being brave and telling the truth is much more valuable than any gold coin found in the mud. The lesson was clear. Greed leads to sadness, but honesty brings a harvest of peace and great happiness. Years passed, and Faith grew up to be a wise and kind young woman who everyone in the village loved. The elders asked her to help them make important decisions because they knew she was honest and very brave. She taught the children of the village that they should always stand up for what is right, even if they are afraid. The gold coin story was told every year at the Harvest Festival so that no one would ever forget the lesson. Zubi became the head of the village guards, and he made sure that everyone was treated fairly and with respect. The village flourished and the farms were green and full of life every single season. One day, an old tired man walked into the village looking for a piece of bread and a place to rest. It was the former Chief Obi, who had lost everything and had no friends because he had been so mean. Faith did not turn him away or shout at him, but she gave him a bowl of warm soup and a seat. She showed him that kindness is more powerful than revenge, and the old man wept with shame for his past actions. Faith had achieved her goal of a happy life, and her heart was as bright as the gold she once found in the mud. She knew that the true treasure was the love and trust of her people and her family. Even though peace had returned, Faith sometimes walked back to the baobab tree where she first hid the coin. She liked to sit under its wide branches and remember the little girl who was so scared of the world. She realized that the conflict she faced had made her a stronger person who could lead others with a soft heart. The village had changed from a place of fear to a place where everyone's voice was heard and valued. She looked at the great river and saw children playing in the water, their laughter echoing through the green trees. Life was good, and the secrets of the past were now just stories told around a warm fire. Zubi often joined her at the tree, and they would talk about their dreams for the future of the village children. They planned to build a school where every child could learn to read, write, and understand the laws of the land. They wanted to make sure that no one would ever be able to trick the people with lies again. Faith knew that knowledge was a shield that could protect the village from any future greedy leaders who might come. The rising tension of the old days was gone, replaced by the rising hope of a new and better generation. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in beautiful colors of orange, purple, and gold. One afternoon, a traveler from a distant land arrived in Omo carrying a message for the village leader. He spoke of a great shadow moving across the plains where other villages were being tricked by men with silver tongues. Faith listened carefully, realizing that the peace they had built must be guarded with great care and constant attention. She knew that the world outside was full of people like the old chief who wanted to take without giving. She called a meeting of all the villagers to discuss how they could help their neighbors and protect themselves. The emotions in the room were strong as people remembered the hunger and the darkness of the past. The villagers decided to send Zubi and a group of young men to teach other villages how to store food and share resources. They wanted to spread the lesson of honesty far and wide so that greed would have no place to hide. Faith felt a sense of pride as she saw her people wanting to help others instead of just keeping their wealth. The stakes were high because if the shadow reached them, all their hard work could be lost in a moment. But they were no longer a village of victims. They were a community of strong and united brothers and sisters. The dialogue between the people was full of courage and a common purpose for the greater good. To make the village even stronger, Faith suggested building a bridge over the great river to connect them with the kingdom next door. This bridge would allow them to trade their extra yams for tools and books that they did not have. The construction was a big job, but everyone worked together, lifting heavy stones and cutting strong timber from the forest. Even the old man, who was once the chief, helped by carrying water to the workers under the hot sun. The bridge became a symbol of how the village had moved from being closed and afraid to being open and helpful. The suspense of whether the bridge would hold disappeared when the first cart crossed it safely. When the bridge was finished, the king of the neighboring land came to visit and was amazed by the spirit of Omo. He saw a village where the leader lived in a simple house and the children were healthy and very well fed. He promised to be their ally and to protect them if any enemies ever tried to harm their peaceful way of life. Faith felt a deep sense of accomplishment as she shook the king's hand in front of all her happy friends. The drama of her childhood led to a legacy of friendship and safety for everyone she loved. She knew her ancestors were smiling down on her from the bright and starry African sky. The village decided to hold a huge festival of light to celebrate the anniversary of the day the rain returned. They made lanterns from colorful paper and hung them from the trees, making the village look like a fairy tale. There was music, dancing, and the smell of delicious spicy jollof rice filled the warm and evening air. Faith wore a beautiful dress made of gold-colored silk to remind her of the coin that started it all. She stood on a platform and thanked everyone for their hard work and for believing in the power of the truth. The deep emotions of the night made many people hug each other and cry happy tears. During the festival, a group of children performed a play about the girl, the chief, and the hidden storehouse. They showed how the girl chose to be brave, even when she was very small and had nothing to give but her voice. The play made everyone laugh, but it also reminded them of the serious lessons they had learned together as a family. The scandal of the past was now a teaching tool that helped the children understand right from wrong. Faith watched the play with a heart full of love, knowing that the story would live on forever in Omo. As Faith grew older, her hair turned white like the clouds, and her eyes became soft and full of deep wisdom. She spent her days sitting in the shade, telling stories to the young ones who gathered around her feet. She told them that the most important thing in life is not how much gold you have, but how much you help others. She explained that a secret kept in the dark can grow into a monster, but a truth told in the light brings freedom. The children listened with wide eyes, soaking up the words of the woman who had saved her village long ago. The rising tension of the world outside didn't scare them because they had her guidance. Zubi, now an old man himself, would sit with her and talk about the many adventures they had shared together. They looked at the thriving village and felt a great peace in their souls, knowing they had done their very best. The secrets they once kept were now part of the history that made the village strong and resilient. They had turned a time of great sadness into a time of lasting joy for hundreds of people. She passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the love of her family and the gratitude of her people. The village built a statue of her holding a small gold coin placed right under the great baobab tree. People from far away came to visit the statue and hear the story of the brave girl from the dusty village. The life lesson remained clear for every traveler. The heart that chooses truth is richer than the hand that holds stolen gold. Her name was whispered with respect by every person who walked the paths of Omo. The village continued to grow and prosper, guided by the principles that Faith had lived by every single day. The children grew up to be honest men and women who cared for the land and for each other with great kindness. The gold coin was kept in a special box in the school, used only to teach the value of hard work and integrity. The story of Faith is still told today in Nigeria, reminding everyone that even a small child can change the world. Whenever it rains, the people of Omo look up at the sky and remember the girl who brought the water back. Her spirit lives on in every act of kindness and every word of truth spoken in the land.